Text messages that have never been seen publicly are providing new insight into just how deeply the Trump White House engaged with debunked election conspiracy theories following the 2020 vote. The 2,319 texts are from the phone of former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. They were recently obtained by Talking Points memo after being turned over to the House January 6th committee earlier this year. The latest batch of released messages shows multiple Republican lawmakers offering to cooperate with plans to keep Trump in office, seemingly in exchange for pardon requests.
Yeah, that's not good.
One such message came from North Carolina's newly elected Senator Ted Budd, who was a congressman at the time. The man Budd asked to be pardoned may possibly be former Congressman Robin Hayes. In 2020, Hayes was found guilty of bribery and fraud charges, but was pardoned by Trump shortly after this text was sent. Another message has to do with the call where Trump asked Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find the exact number of votes he needed to reverse Joe Biden's 2020 win in the state.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country. The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated, because the 2,236 and absentee ballots, I mean, they're all exact numbers that were done by accounting firms, law firms, etc. And even if you cut them in half, and cut them in half again, it's more votes than we need.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
I just can't.
Okay,
that call never.
So, you know, Willie, the thing is,
in a bad way,
we all grew up and we'd see reruns of Perry Mason where somebody breaks down on the bench, right? And they'd be like, and there would be the smoking gun. There's always a smoking gun. And the first thing every law professor taught you was, this ain't Perry Mason. There's never a smoking gun. You got to piece your case together with depositions, with interrogatories, piece by piece, bit by bit. And over time, if you work hard enough, you'll get the theory of the case and you'll prevail in court. This is straight out of Perry Mason. Like Donald Trump is like, I want you to steal this election for me, get this many votes. It's really shocking. There's no way that I believe that George, I want to be careful what I say here. Let me just say, you certainly seem to have a prima facie case in the state of Georgia to indict Donald Trump. It's just shocking.
Well, we know that Jack Smith, the special counsel, is talking to Brad Raffensperger, is going to talk to Brad Raffensperger, an indication that that's where the Justice Department is looking, exactly what you're talking about right there. But you're right. If this were Perry Mason, you go, come on, guys. Would the writers take a week off? This is too easy. You can't just have the guy say it on the phone. And there he did. And it was recorded, and Brad Raffensperger recorded the phone call because he suspected that Donald Trump was going to do something like that. More text now. Pennsylvania Congressman Fred Keller floated a plan to Meadows that would make it seem as if Trump didn't actually want Raffensperger to find the votes. This is actually how they were going to explain this. Instead, Trump would claim he was trying to trap Raffensperger to see if he could be trusted. If the phone conversation was leaked, the theory went, Keller said it would raise the question, quote, if Raffensperger can't be trusted on a phone call, how can he be trusted with Georgia's elections? Get this now.
Wow.
Meadows replied he loved that idea. So we'll explain it away by saying it was all a part of our plan to trap Raffensperger to see if he could be trusted. Another exchange shows Meadows agreeing to meet with Georgia Republican Rick Allen after the congressman tells him he has a, quote, source that can prove there was election fraud. Allen later tells Meadows that his source is actually, quote, a source that is feeding his source. He then sends Meadows a conspiracy theory about Romanians and Ukrainians stealing the identities of U.S. citizens for the purpose of rigging the 2020 election for Democrats. We're not making this stuff up. We will note some of these conversations appear to be incomplete and may be missing context. NBC News has reached out to those involved for responses. Joe, some of the texts we talked about yesterday included our running joke, yours and mine, about the Italian dude with the satellite. That conspiracy theory being taken very seriously by Mark Meadows, passed on to President Trump, who then went to the Justice Department and said, look into the Italian dude with the satellite who used the satellite to change votes from Trump to Biden.
Yes. Hey, speaking of running jokes, you remember back in 1947, you and I come back from the war, and what do?
Sure.
We're like, we saw Patton. He needed a little more oil to get into Germany. What did we say? What if we created something called cold fusion, right? And we've been working on it since 47. Looks like they finally listened to us. It looks like the government did. And so now this cold fusion, I hope that we get at least some recognition. I don't need to get rich off of cold fusion. You and I, we've been working on this, 70, 80 years? Like, we need some credit for this.
We never do. The Nobel Committee overlooks us every single year. But we know what happened. I think that's enough for us.
In our hearts. All right. So, Willie, as we bounce around like a ping pong ball in a marble cage, I don't know what that means. 1980. I read you something from the Google machine. From December 10th, 1980, because as you were talking about how Meadows is like, oh, hey, well, wait, maybe we can just say that we were doing an investigation of our own on Raffensperger. I said, wait, this sounds a lot like that Florida congressman in Abscam that was caught shoving cash into his pockets and he couldn't get it all in. And they asked him how later. And he said, I was conducting my own investigation. Listen to this. Laura Kiernan from December 10th, 1980, Washington Post. Representative Richard Kelly took $25,000 from FBI agents posing as representatives of oil-rich Arabs because he was investigating his own suspicions that his congressional staff had been infiltrated by persons who could destroy his political career. A federal court was told yesterday. He took $25,000 in 1974 to, quote, seek out the truth on his own. And you know, Jonathan Lemire passed his prologue. Nobody bought that in the 1970s during Abscam. Nobody's going to buy this now. I think the shocking thing is, I know Mark Meadows. I've known him for quite some time. I sat and talked to him when he was still a member of Congress. I tried to provide him some guidance every time you talk to him. He seems like he's listening, but then you talk to others who are telling him the exact opposite, and he seems like he's listening there. The lack of judgment shown by Mark Meadows on the incoming is absolutely shocking. I had staff members that were in their 20s and early 30s when I first got to Congress. They would have cut anything off approaching any impropriety like this in a second. It's shocking what these reveal about Mark Meadows.
Yeah, I'm still blown away by this idea for a cover story that Donald Trump was trying to ensnare Brad Raffensperger, test his loyalty. Can we double agent Donald Trump going undercover to suggest if Brad Raffensperger was an ethical public official or not? But yes, Joe, we know this. The chief of staff position is meant to be a gatekeeper. It's meant to keep things away from the president that are damaging or conspiratorial, and only put to the president things that would matter, could advance his agenda for the American people. And that's not at all what Mark Meadows is doing here. He's a conduit, taking these crazy theories, allowing them into the White House, some of them bringing them into the Oval Office and placing on Donald Trump's resolute desk. No gatekeeper whatsoever. And the texts, which we've been revealed now over a couple of days, just show that, though not uncommon for the chief of staff to speak to congressmen, to text with them, that he is up to his neck in these conspiracy theories, willing to play ball with some of the most outlandish and potentially even criminal claims. And these texts seem to be on a silver platter for any number of the investigations that are currently underway against Donald Trump.
Well, they're talking about overthrowing an election. They're talking about overthrowing an incoming president of the United States. So, yes, there's some criminal liability attached to these texts. And let's step out for a second here, Willie, and see. Yes, I mean, what Talking Points memo has gotten a hold of, absolutely incredible. And we see these members of Congress being encouraged by Mark Meadows to continue their attempts to overthrow a Democratic election. But let's remember, he was doing the same thing to Jenny Thomas.
Yep. Yeah, he sure was. I mean, those texts early on were damning to Mark Meadows, as so much has been damning. And Mara, think back to the videos we've seen from the January 6th committee, the testimony we've heard about the way Mark Meadows behaved on January 6th. People came to him and said, you've got to do something. The president has to go make a statement. He said, I don't want to cross the big guy. Just extraordinary cowardice. And now we're seeing it again in these text messages. It would be easy, again, to laugh at some of these theories about the satellite and the Romanians and all that stuff, except for the fact that they made it all the way into the Oval Office, and then Donald Trump went to the Justice Department and said, go look into all this stuff. This is an attempted coup.
It's an attempted coup. In some ways, Mark Meadows was kind of acting while treating the democracy like a mob boss, or like the aide to a mob boss, right? Handing his candy around for those who would play his game and toe the company line. My personal favorite is when Rick Allen asks for a pardon for a friend, and then says at the end of his text, and Merry Christmas. The casualness with which these people thought that they would not get caught. I mean, we know that. And they still, these texts are kind of out there to these prosecutors, just as Joe said, daring them to be held accountable. I think it shows you that if they aren't held accountable, we have a real problem on our hands.
Yeah.
If this comes out and nothing happens to these individuals, and they are allowed to continue to do, quote unquote, the people's work, so far as any of them are capable of it, we're going to have a real problem here. I mean, you do have to laugh because it's just dark times, and you have to kind of find some way to cope with it. I just watched Home Alone classic, and it's like, this is like Home Alone villain Harry and Marv level ridiculousness. But it's
insult to Joe Pesci, by the way.
That's probably true. My apologies to Mr. Pesci.
Yeah.
But they have to be held accountable. I mean, please, somebody hold them accountable.